interdependent. So this concept is known as globalization. So globalization is a philosophy. It's a philosophy of making the whole world a small village where nations will be interdependent, where there will be no boundary. It's a philosophy of creating boundaryless globe. So globalization simply means it's a philosophy of creating the whole world only as a single country. Though there will be no individual identity of countries. Every country will be treated as a single one. This concept is known as globalization. So before discussing globalization, let me first tell you what is the definition of globalization. Globalization, as per UNESCO definition, it's a set of economic, social, technological, and political and cultural structure and process arising from the changing character of production, consumption of trade of goods and assets that comprise the base of international political economy. In order to understand this definition, let me first tell you what are different types of globalization. There are different forms of globalization. One is economic globalization. What is economic globalization? In case of economic globalization, there will be free flow of goods, services, investment across different countries. There will be boundaryless trading. There will be free flow of goods between countries. That type of globalization is known as economic globalization. There can be social globalization. What is social globalization? In case of social globalization, the people of different countries follows, respect the custom, traditions of each other. In India, we celebrate Christmas. In India, we celebrate Eid. In USA, they are celebrating now Diwali. They are celebrating Raksha Bandhan. That means they are showing respect to each other's custom, tradition, and whole world is celebrating a unique culture, a multiculturalism. This concept is known as social globalization. What is technological globalization? Next type of globalization is technological globalization. In case of technological globalization, if a country invent something new technology, the benefit of that technology is shared by all other countries. Let's take an example, COVID-19 vaccine. It is developed by few countries, but the vaccine is distributed throughout the world. So the world, each and every country of the world get the benefit of the technological globalization. A new technology comes, suppose a new engineering technology comes, and this technology is shared between all the countries of the world. That is known as technological globalization. Political globalization. Nowadays, we are creating many multinational organizations like United Nations, like IMF, World Bank, many multilateral organizations through which the entire world sit together and try to solve some of the political problems of the world. Cultural globalization. So globalization is a philosophy, it's a structure, it's a process of making a unified globe. It's a concept, it's a philosophy of making the whole world a only one country, as a one village. This is known as globalization. So we have discussed globalization. Now we'll discuss what are the drivers of globalization. What are the main factors which lead to globalizations? Generally, globalization occurs due to technological innovations. First driver is technological innovations. As more and more new technology is coming, and the benefit of this technology is to be shared by most of the countries of the world. The countries are interdependent for technological innovations. The innovation made by one country, but the benefit is shared between other member countries. This is known as technological innovations. Due to technological innovations, globalization occurs. Second one is transportation cost and speed of transport. We know that in case of international trade, transportation cost plays a major role. As the transportation cost reduces and the transportation time reduces, there is the business spread across boundaries of different countries. That means the goods and services produced in USA is transmitted to India. Goods services produced in US is transmitted to China. Goods of China is sold throughout the world. Because of reduction in transportation cost and the speed of transport. Third one is participating in global value chain and enhanced trade opportunity. Nowadays, multinational companies are procuring their raw material from one country and producing it in another country and selling the product in another country. Let's take an example, Indian generic pharma companies. They procure majority of their ingredients or raw material, which is known as API, active pharma ingredients, APIs from China. And they produce generic medicines in India. And the generic medicines are sold throughout the world. India is the largest producer of generic medicines of the world. During time of COVID-19, we have distributed numerous amount of generic medicine to the world, to the third order countries, to the low income countries. We have distributed because of the concept of globalization. Next, in a globalized world is much more peaceful in nature. As our Prime Minister always tells, this era is not of Yuddha, it's of Buddha. So it's a country, it's a century of not war, but it's a century of peaceful coexistence. So globalization is must for peaceful coexistence, where we do not think a country in isolation, rather we think of the world as one, which is known as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This is the philosophy. For peaceful coexistence, globalization is must. Then fourth one is liberalization of world economy and harmonization of trade rules under WTO. Nowadays, each and every country is liberalized. Every country, however closed it is opening of its economy to different foreign players. Nowadays, no country can exist in isolation. Countries are harmonizing the trade rules. Countries are unifying, simplifying the international trade rules. Countries have come together to a common forum to decide the rules of doing international business, which is known as WTO, World Trade Organization. Next, leveraging factor endowment in production. What is endowment? Endowment, the term endowment simply means abundant, plenty. Some products are plentifully available in some country. Oil is plentifully available in Gulf countries. Excess of their demand. So this product they want to sell throughout the world. So they want to take leverage of that. India's rice production is 3 to 4 times of its own consumptions, wheat production, rice production. We are a food surplus country in case of wheat and rice. Now, what we do? We want to sell the excess production of wheat and rice throughout the world. And there are many global problems like climate change, terrorism, and these global problems cannot be solved by a single country. These problems are to be solved with the integrated efforts of most of the countries. So if most of the countries agree together, they can solve many of the global problems like climate change, like terrorism, like many others, eradicating communicable diseases like COVID-19. It's a problem, it's a global problem, global malady, which is solved by the combined efforts of many countries taken together. We have created many organizations to solve like WHO. You might have heard regarding WHO, World Health Organization, during the time of COVID-19. It is issuing many guidelines how to tackle COVID problems. So these are driving forces of globalization. These are some of the changes, some of the developments which lead to higher degree of globalization in this present day context. Next, we will discuss some of the stage of globalization, stages of globalization, how globalization emerges. Those are known as stages of globalization. We can classify the stage or process of globalization into 4 to 5 stages. First stage of globalization, it started in the year 1830. This is the first stage of globalization. It started during the year 1830. And this period was marked by growth of global business due to development of rail, road, and ocean transport, and large-scale manufacturing and trading companies. And this phase started with 1830 and more established by 1880. During this period, what happens? There is massive development of rail roads, ocean transport, rail transport. Many large-scale manufacturing and trading companies emerges, and they try to sell their product in different countries. Prior to 1880, this was not possible due to lack of transportation facility. But from the year 1830 to 80, there is massive development of rail transport, road transport, ocean transport, as a result of which large MNCs, manufacturing and trading MNCs emerges, which started trading in different countries. So this is known as first stage of globalization. Next stage of globalization started, which is known as the second stage of globalization. The second stage of globalization started around 1900, and this stage started from 1900 and it lasts up to 1929, the year of Great Depression. During this phase, what happens? Many MNCs were established, mostly European MNCs, which have colonizations of Asia. These MNCs operate in colonies of Asia. These MNCs operate in Middle East, African countries. Companies like Siemens, Nestle, Shell, British Petroleum, these are emerged during the second phase of globalization, that is, which started from 1900 and last up to 1929. And in 19 after the Great Depression of 1929, this second phase of globalization comes to an end. Again, in between 1929 to 1945, a second world war occurs. There was massive devastation in Second World War. The entire Europe was devastated. So, and the international business was very low during World War II. So, in the year 1945, once the World War was over, and USA and its allied forces and its allied countries were the winners, and they sit together in 1945 and decide how to restore the global trade. And the third stage of globalization started in 1945 onwards. In 1945 onwards, they start and they sit up at a place in USA which is known as Bretton Woods. And they have done a Bretton Woods conference. In that conference, they have decided to restore the world which was devastated by World War II. And they want to create some multilateral or multi-international organizations for this. For this, they are trying to set up three important institutions. First institution which they want to set up is known as a bank which will provide finance for international business. That bank is known as IBRD, which later on is known as World Bank. They want to set up another bank which will finance the BOP problems of the member countries. BOP means balance of payment problem. During international trade, the settlement is to be made by some commonly accepted currency or foreign exchange. This forex crisis, if a country is facing forex crisis, it will appear a separate bank which will finance those countries which are facing BOP crisis, and that bank is known as IMF or International Monetary Fund. And they want to set up one organization which will frame rule regulations for international trade, and that organization is known as WTO, World Trade Organization. Or priorly they want to set up ITU, International Trade Organization. But USA opposed the setting of ITU. Therefore, ITU could not be settled. And in between, 23 countries in 1947 decide that when the ITU is set up, we do international trade between ourselves with an temporary agreement. That agreement is known as GATT. So with the setup of GATT, IMF, IBRD, the third stage of globalization started. And in this stage, many multinational corporations like Coca-Cola, Philips, IBM was established. So this is the third stage of globalization. And by 1960s, most of the countries have liberalized their economy. They have reduced the barriers to trade. What is barriers to trade? The barriers to trade are the hindrances imposed by governments in case of international trade. The barriers are in form of two. One is trade barriers, another is non-trade barriers, or tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. What is tariff barriers? Tariff barriers are in form of tax, and non-tariff barriers are non-tax barriers. So by 1960s, as more and more countries are liberalized, they open up their economy, they reduce the trade barriers, or the globalization process continues. The fourth stage of globalization started during 1980s. It is the beginning of fourth stage of globalization. The fourth stage of globalization started due to the invent of internet, due to the invent of ICT, information communication technology. And in this stage, the world is much more globalized. Now, globalization is not restricted to trade, commerce. Globalization is started in all, each and every aspect of life. People think that they are not citizen of a country, they are the citizen of the whole world. The entire work culture of the world changes. People come together, people of India and people of US previously thinking they are much far away, but the internet has bring them together. So, with the help of ICTs, computers, information technology, globalization has seen a new height. In this era, there is common institutions like banking facility, insurance facility, fintech facility, e-commerce facility, infotainment facility, retailing, tourism across the globe. And in this phase, really the globe has converted into a small village, which is the major concept of globalization. And we are not in a citizen of a country, but we feel ourselves to be a citizen of the entire global village. So I summarize my discussion in stages of globalization. We have discussed there are four stages. First stage of globalization, it started from 1830, last up to 1880s, and it was influenced by introduction of railroads, ocean transport, etc. Second phase of globalization, which started from 1909 to 1930s, and it started due to rise of electricity and steel production. Third phase of globalization, it started from 1948 to 1970s. It started due to the creation of multilateral organizations, reduction of barriers to trade, creation of organizations like GATT, Bretton Woods Conference, IMF, World Bank, like this. The fourth phase of globalization lasts from 1980s to 2008. It started with advances in information communication, manufacturing, consultation, technology, privatization, etc. And the fifth, in many books, fourth and fifth are combined together. They call it fourth stage. And if you call it fifth stage of globalization, we can classify it from 2008 onwards till date, which is influenced by information communication technology, which is influenced by AI, which is influenced by blockchain technologies. The technology plays a major role of globalizing the world more and more. So these are different phases of globalization or stages of globalization. Next, we will discuss effects of globalization. Due to globalization, what happens? Globalization is a process of integrating the whole world into a small village. It's a philosophy of creating one for all for one. It's a philosophy of integrating the economies of the world. It's a philosophy of integrating the culture of the world. It's a philosophy of integrating the political atmosphere of the world. It's a philosophy of integrating the technological innovations of the world. It's a way of creating a global village. So, what are the effects of globalization? As the world becoming more and more globalized, what are the effects? The first effect is integration of economies. What is integration of economies? The economies of different countries are integrated. Indian economy is linked to US economy. Due to globalization. There is a saying, if USA sneezes, the entire world gets cough, gets cold. The US economy is linked to all other economies. If there is a problem in US economy, there will be rippling effect in other economies also. Because in today's globalized world, economies of different countries are interlinked, interrelated. If there is boom in Chinese economy, there will be boom in global production. Previously, Chinese economy was booming and its effect was seen throughout the globe. Nowadays, we are talking that India is the next growth engine after China. Once Indian economy flourishes, the benefit of it will also be shared by other economies of the world. This is known as integration of economies. As world is much more globalized, the economies of different countries are integrated. Next one is integration of strategy. Nowadays, companies are preparing products, services for the entire world. There is the companies have global visions. Their business strategies are globalized. Their business activities are globalized. So there is integration of strategy. Next, integration of industries. Industries of one country is integrated with the industries of other countries. Indian companies source their raw material from China, produce it in India, market it in US. It's in this context, all the economies, all the industries of the world are integrated. Most of the firms of USA are producing their products in China. China is the global manufacturing hub of the world because of low cost raw material and low cost labor. Labor cost is low, raw material cost is low, technology cost is low. So most of the MNCs produce their product in China and sell it throughout the world. This is integration of industries. Next, integration of markets. The markets of the world has integrated. A product, Apple introduced its product in USA today, the next day it introduced the product in Indian markets. The market of the MNCs are integrated. They design the product for the entire globe. The name of the brand of the product is global. This is known as integration of market. So the process of globalization integrates global economies. It integrates global strategy. It integrates global industries. It integrates global markets. It integrates global drivers, global players in order to create organization for global environment. It has created integration of services, integration of resources, integration of products, and create a boundary-less environment. Few years back, I have seen a movie called Path, starring Amitabh Bachchan. In that, Amitabh Bachchan play a role of a 8 years or 10 years old boy which is suffering from a disease called progeria. And that 10-year boy in his school participated in a competition and got the first prize. What that boy has created, that boy has demonstrated a world, a globe where there is nothing, there is white colored globe. That means in that globe, what he has shown, there is no boundary. The entire world is one. He is thinking of creating a boundaryless world where there will be free movement of goods, services, people, investment, cultures. And this process of creating boundaryless world is known as globalization, and we are progressing towards creating a such type of world, and we are in the process of globalization. Next, we will discuss different drivers of globalization for an industry. For an industry perspective, why industries are globalized more? That is known as industrial globalization. Why industries are producing in one country and selling in another country, and they are originated, they are registered in another country. So what are the drivers? There are four major drivers of industry drivers for globalization. First one is market driver, cost or economic drivers, government drivers, competitive drivers. What is market drivers? Market drivers means some of the factors which drive industry to be globalized. That is, first one is convergence of lifestyle and taste. Nowadays, the lifestyle of most of the countries are more or less equal. Due to advent of technology, we see what is in trend in USA today, that becomes the trend in India tomorrow. Convergence of lifestyle of different people have converged, has become one. Second one is increased travel. People are traveling frequently from one country to another. So people are becoming now a global consumer. People are demanding kadhi chawal in US restaurants. So US restaurants are bound to put kadhi chawal as a menu in their counter, so that an Indian traveling to US and demanding kadhi chawal can get it. Growth of global and regional channels. Establishment of world brands. Apple is not a brand of US, it's a world brand. It's a global brand. Google is a global brand. Microsoft is a global brand. Windows is a global product. And nowadays companies are pushing for global advertising. One advertisement, that advertisement is shown throughout the world. And as the life cycle of the products are shortening, reducing day by day, people are thinking of marketing this product throughout the world and leveraging. Next, these are certain market drivers for globalization. Next, we will discuss what are the cost driver, economic driver of globalization, industries globalization. Continuing push for economies of scale. We have already discussed the concept of economies of scale. When you produce more and more quantity of a particular product, the per unit cost comes down. And this concept is known as economies of scale. To get the benefit of economies of scale, people are producing more. Once you produce more and get the benefit of economies of scale, you have to sell it in many countries. Next, accelerating technological innovations. Technology is fast changing. Companies are becoming more and more globalized to get new technology. Advances in transportation. We have already discussed the transportation mechanism and transportation cost has reduced. This has forced industries to be more and more globalized. Next, what are the next two driver? Next driver is government driver. What is government driver? Government is reducing tariffs, tax. Government is creating trade blocks. There is regional integrations. Some countries are combining together and creating trade blocks. Like SARC country. SARC is a trade bloc. Countries are signing FTA, free trade agreement between themselves. NAFTA, AFTA, these are certain trade blocks. Countries are creating trade blocks and doing international business between themselves. Declining in role of government. Government is now not interfering in international business. Government is reducing both tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. Tariff barriers are in form of tax and non-tariff barriers are non-tax barriers like quota, like LCR. These are non-tariff barriers. Shift in open market economies. Nowadays, most of the economies are open. Countries are shifting from closed economy to open economy. These are the government-based drivers for industrial globalization. Competitive drivers. Nowadays, there is increased level of world trade, increase of foreign acquisition, companies is globally centered, increased form of global strategic alliances. There is globalization of financial markets. Companies are no more channelizing their funds from domestic market. A good MNC, a well-known MNC, let's take an example, TCS, Reliance, Adani Enterprises. It wants to raise bonds. It can raise from Indian market or US market. It can raise funds from UK market or any other market. Cultures. People are consuming common cultures. These are competitive drivers of globalization. So we are discussing regarding different drivers of globalization. Next we will discuss potential for global strategies. Nowadays companies are preparing strategy for the entire globe. So what are the factors? What are the potentials which influence global strategy? There are four important factors which influence global strategy. First one is market-based factors. Second one is economic factors. Third one is competitive factors. And the fourth one is environmental factors. These are the four factors which influence the potential for globalization. First one is market factors. What are the market factors which influence industrial globalizations? The market factors means creating homogeneous market needs, creating global customers, consumers, transferable brands, promotional strategies. These are market-based factors. What is economic factors? What are the economic factors which influence industrial globalization? The economic factors are integration of economies of scale in manufacturing production, worldwide sourcing of raw material. There are certain environmental factors which influence industrial globalization. What are the environmental factors which influence industrial globalization? Environmental factors means declining in transportation cost, improved logistic networks, fast telecommunication between countries, or the technological developments. These are influencing industrial globalization. And there are certain competitive factors which influence global industrial globalization. What are those competitive factors? That is interdependence among countries, global move of competitors. These are certain competitive factors. So we have discussed what is globalization. Next, we have discussed the different forms of globalization, different stages of globalization, different factors which influence globalization, factors which influence industrial globalization. Next, we will discuss different implications of globalization. Implications means effects. What are the implications of globalization? Due to globalization, first implication is international alliances. There are different international alliances, business alliances, political alliances, military alliances, business alliances. Let's take an example. There are international joint ventures, Maruti Suzuki, Kawasaki Bajaj, ICICI Pru. These are some examples of international joint ventures. People are creating international alliances, political alliance, G20, G8, G7, United Nations. This type of organization people are creating for political globalization. So, first one is there is international alliances. There is organizational challenges. Nowadays, due to globalization, competition, the firms are facing competition from throughout the world. There is organizational challenge. People have to realign their organization structure. People have to realign their reporting hierarchy. People have to realign their communication linkages, their reward mechanism. Due to globalization, there is much more relation between government and business. The MNCs are creating a conducive relationship with the host country government. MNCs has muscle power, they have money power. Government is the rule making agency. They come together, they join hand to get a win-win benefit. And due to globalization, there is competition. Firms have now their global rivals. Competition is not limited to a country now. Nowadays, competition is global competition, globalized competition. So there are certain factors which affect globalization. There are certain driving forces for globalization. There are certain restraining forces for globalization. Driving forces are those forces which increase the speed of globalization. Rapid technology, culture, market needs, cost, free market, economic integration, peace, management vision, strategic intent, global strategy are one driving forces for globalization. But cultural differences, market differences, cost differential, national controls, nationalism, war are some of the restraining forces for globalization. So we have discussed different drivers of globalization. Next, we will discuss globalization in post-COVID era. Some of the recent developments of globalizations we will discuss. What are the in post-COVID era? What happens? So globalization is a never-ending process. Globalization is an evolving process. Globalization is a continuing process. In between this, COVID-19 has arrived in the world. After COVID-19, most of the countries feel that it is created by China. Though there is no sufficient evidence that it is created by China, most of the countries feel. So they want to come out of China, but they cannot. Countries are thinking that there is sudden rise of China due to trade imbalances between them and China. Mostly there is a trade war or tariff war between US and China. US is accusing China that it is violating the fundamental principles of WTO. It is creating non-discrimination. It is not transparent in its trade policies. It is playing with its currencies, as a result of which most of the countries are now questioning the concept or merits of globalization. Therefore, after COVID-19, two new concepts are developed. What are the two new concepts? First concept is known as re-globalization. What is re-globalization? It's a most important word, re-globalization, a new concept, two concepts post-COVID-19. There are two important concepts which comes in concept of globalization. First one is re-globalization. We will discuss the concept of re-globalization. What is that? Next, another concept comes that is known as gated globalization. What is gated globalization? We will discuss. What is re-globalization? Re-globalization means prior to COVID, most of the MNCs have their manufacturing base in China. And once COVID comes, they want to cut relation with China, but they cannot because their MNCs have manufacturing base in China. They are much more dependent on China. So though they want to take their factories out of China, they cannot. Therefore, after COVID-19, most of the MNCs have thinking of a new strategy, that is China plus one strategy. What is China plus one strategy? Prior to COVID, they have only manufacturing base in China. Now they want to set up another manufacturing base. China plus one or two. They want to take away their manufacturing from China to one to other low cost producing country like India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, any other. People are creating certain institutions to counter China, like AUKUS, Australia, UK, US, Quad, Australia, India, Japan, US. They have created this organization to counter China. This concept is known as re-globalization, where the countries are thinking of creating new markets beyond China. This is known as re-globalization. Another concept is coming that is known as gated globalization. What is gated globalization? This is another concept of globalization, that is gated globalization. Most of the countries are now thinking that they will produce themselves. They will produce maximum things. They will produce most of the goods and services consumed by their country, because in future if COVID-19 like situation comes, they will be self-reliant or Atmanirbhar. India has launched its own gated globalization scheme that is known as Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India scheme. Like India, most of the countries are now thinking of creating self-reliant industries. They want to curtail imports. If all the country will follow this type of strategy, then the concept of globalization will hamper. Yes, self-sufficient is well, but at what cost? If you are not good in producing a particular product and you are subsidizing your manufacturers to produce it, then it is not fulfilling the concept of globalization. It is a gated globalization. So gated globalization means creating, now most of the countries, Europe, US has made a clarion call for certain industries to produce in US only, to become indigenous. Pharma industry, aerospace industry, defense, electronics. EU is seriously, European Union is seriously exploring the possibility of relocating certain industries to lower centers of Eastern Europe countries. Japan has announced a $200 billion package to shift structure and sustain industries from China either to Japan or elsewhere. This type of things give rise to a concept called gated globalization. Please see, gated globalization is a negative strategy, whereas re-globalization is a positive strategy. Gated globalization calls for protectionism, giving protection to your own manufacturers. Every country wants to produce products in their own country. But re-globalization simply means you create a China plus one or India plus one, like this strategy. So re-globalization is based on positive strategy, while gated globalization is negatively addressed. So re-globalization and gated globalization, re-globalization is based on positive strategy, while gated globalization is negatively addressed, and its reluctant fallout will not only be geo-economic but geopolitical, geostrategic. Gated globalization will hinder the process of globalization. So we are discussing regarding globalization, re-globalization, gated globalization, all these concepts we have discussed. So now we will summarize our discussion too. So what we have discussed? We have discussed the concept of globalization. Globalization means open trade. Globalization means creating a civil, open society. Globalization means creating multilateral organizations which will cater to the needs of the whole world. Globalization means a much more interrelated, interdependent globe. Globalization is a tea tsunami. It's a process, it's a continuing process. The world will be globalized much more day by day, day by day. You cannot stop its forces. It's a tea tsunami. You can only slow down its speed, but in future the world will be much more globalized. As our Prime Minister always tells that India believes in the conception. For India, we believe a concept that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Let the whole world be treated as one family, and let us create such a world where each and every member of the world is a family members to us. Let's live together. Let's solve the common problem of the world as one world. This concept is known as globalization. So in our today's concept, we have discussed certain words like globalization, the standardization. What are the important questions? First, discuss the meaning of globalization. Next question is, what are different stages of globalization? 5 stages of globalization. Next one, we have discussed the effects of globalization. What are the driving forces of globalization? What are the strategic implications of globalization? And what are the main challenges of globalization? These are some of the important questions of our discussion today. And these are certain reference materials which you can follow to know more regarding globalization. Thank you. Thank you for attending my lecture today. Thank you. Thank you.